Hi, I'm Anuradha Basu, and today I'm going to tell you the tale of Macbeth by William Shakespeare. Macbeth was a valiant soldier, a Bellona's bridegroom, under a subject under the King of Scotland, King Duncan. He was a valor's minion. He was a brave soldier. And when the play begins, it begins in storm, thunder, and lightning. And in this storm and thunder, the three witches meet. And the first witch says, "When shall we three meet again in thunder, lightning, and in rain?" The second witch says, "When the hurly-burly is gone, when the battle's lost and won." The theme of the play comes out in the speeches of the witches, in the what the witches say at the beginning. "Fair is foul and foul is fair, hover through the fog and fill the air." So everything is inverted in the play. Macbeth, who's a valor's minion, has just killed a rebel, that is MacDonald, the merciless MacDonald, the Thane of Glamis, and he's returning triumphant with Banquet through the forests, through the paths in the forest, when they meet the three witches. And the first witch says, "All hail Macbeth, hail to thee, Thane of Glamis. All hail Macbeth, hail to thee, Thane of Glamis. All hail Macbeth, thou shalt be king hereafter." These are the prophecies which capture the brain and soul and mind and soul and body of Macbeth. He says, "I am Thane of Glamis. How do you say that I am Thane of Glamis? And how can I be king hereafter? The king lives." Banquet says, "If you can look into the seeds of time and say which grain will grow and which will not, then speak out. What will happen?" Macbeth says, "Say, from whence you owe this strange intelligence? Or why upon this blasted heath you stop our way with such prophetic greeting?" The witches say that to Banquet, they say, "Thou shalt get kings, though thou be none." Banquet will not be the king, but Banquet will beget kings. This again sows the seed of canker in the mind of Macbeth. Banquet will beget kings, means Banquet's sons will be kings, but Macbeth will become the king. These are the beginnings of turmoil in the play. And Banquet says that these prophecies are not to be believed. The instruments of darkness tell us truths, win us with honest trifles, to betray us in the deepest consequence. Now, then immediately after returning, Macbeth writes a letter. On the way he is returning, Macbeth writes a letter to Lady Macbeth. And Lady Macbeth immediately pounces upon the prophecy. He says, "Glamis thou art, and Glamis, and shalt be what thou art promised." But that means Lady Macbeth wants Macbeth to become the king. "But thou art too full of the milk of human kindness." Macbeth is too kind. How can he become the king? So Lady Macbeth has to work upon Macbeth's mind. And the theme of the play here, again another theme, comes out in the words of King Duncan when he talks about the rebel Thane of Glamis. "There is no art to find the mind's construction in the face." This one cannot read one's mind by looking at the face. Okay? Now, here Lady Macbeth and Macbeth decide to invite King Duncan over to the castle in Inverness and there kill him. Okay? When Duncan enters the castle, Lady Macbeth says the raven itself is hoarse, that crooks the fatal entrance of Duncan. And Duncan enters the castle. Macbeth says that he is here in double trust. I am his kinsman as well as his subject. That goes against the idea of killing him. But Lady Macbeth works upon Macbeth's mind. Your face, my thing, is like a book that has strange readings. Look like the time, bear welcome in your eye. Look the innocent flower, but be the serpent underneath. And then, when Macbeth is almost convinced, he says, if it were done, when it is done, then 'twere well, it were done quickly. It is best to get it done and over with. Lady Macbeth says, when Macbeth falters, to commit this deed, terrible deed of murder, terrible transgression, then Lady Macbeth says, was the hope drunk wherein you dressed yourself? Macbeth says, what if we fail? Lady Macbeth says, we fail? But screw your courage to the sticking place and we will not fail. That night when Duncan is to be murdered, Banquet says, there is husbandry in heaven, the candles are all out. And that night, Lady Macbeth first pushes Macbeth to do the deed. First, she herself goes with the knife, but she is unable to kill Duncan. And she says, if he had not looked so much like my father, I would have done it. Then she pushes Macbeth to do the deed. Macbeth sees a dagger before his eyes, a dagger of the mind, a false creation proceeding from the heat-oppressed brain. He imagines a dagger in front of him. And then he goes and he kills King Duncan. This is the terrible deed of murder that Macbeth, who is a very honest and brave soldier, commits, and commits a crime. And after this, Macbeth says, Macbeth has murdered sleep. Macbeth shall sleep no more. Sleep, which is the benediction of nature, will come to Macbeth no more. And after this, just following this, there is the porter scene where the porter equivocates about the tailor and about Henry Henry Garnet trial. I will not go into those details, but I will come straight to the scene where Duncan's murder is discovered, and Lady Macbeth comes to the scene. Banquet comes to the scene, and everybody is there. And Lady Macbeth gives a very faint reaction. What, in our house? Banquet says, too cruel anyway. Macbeth covers it all up with a tremendous amount of rhetoric. All is but toys, renown and grace is dead, the wine of life is drawn, only the lees are left for the bold to brag of. So, these cover-ups, are the first step to Macbeth becoming a professional murderer. But Macbeth's mind is not at rest, because he knows that Banquet will not be the king, but Banquet's successors will be the king. So this is as I said, the canker in the mind. He says, To be thus is nothing but safely thus. So Banquo's successor, Banquo's son, Fleance also must be killed. And now Macbeth becomes a professional assassin. He hires murderers to go and kill Banquo and his son. Banquo flees. Fleance also flees, but Banquo is killed by the hired murderers. Macbeth falls down the ladder of valiance, valor, and becomes a professional murderer, or an ally of the professional murderers from a valor's minion. And after the murder of Banquo, Fleance escapes. We have scorched the snake, not killed it, because Macbeth goes on to say that, oh, full of scorpions is my mind, dear wife, he tells his wife. Thou knowest that Banquo and Fleance lives. And then when he gets the news that Banquo has been killed, he says that the grown serpent lies, the worm that's fled hath nature in time will venom breed. So Fleance lives. After the death of Banquo, Macbeth starts to degenerate in his mind psychologically. There is a huge banquet spread out for the guests, and Macbeth has also become the king. So in the celebration of Macbeth's kingship after the death of Duncan, a huge banquet is spread. Macbeth says, when he wants to goes to sit on the chair of the head of the guests, he sees Banquo's ghost sitting there, shaking his gory locks at him. He says, "Shake not your gory locks at me." And then somehow Lady Macbeth manages the situation and removes Macbeth from the scene. So after this shows the psychological degradation of Macbeth after committing a sin. But Macbeth now has become a professional murderer, a tyrant. He knows that Macduff, the Thane of Fife, has to be killed. So he says that I must make an attack on the castle of Macduff, the Thane of Fife, because he is a danger to his throne. And at this point of time, we find that where Macbeth is going more and more deep into blood, Lady Macbeth has lost her hold over herself, and Lady Macbeth is sleepwalking in the famous sleepwalking scene. She is walking with her eyes open. She is washing her hands again and again, and she says, "Oh, all the perfumes of Arabia will not sweeten this little hand of mine." She just cannot get out that one spot of blood from her hand. Okay, so she has totally degraded psychologically, broken down psychologically after this deed of murder. When she dies, the only thing that Macbeth has to say is that she should have died hereafter. That is the only word that Macbeth has to say when Lady Macbeth dies. Macbeth himself says that I am in blood stepped so far that returning were as tedious as going over. He has already killed the wife of Thane of Fife, that is Macduff, and his child. And Lady Macbeth had, in her sleepwalking scene, said that Thane of Fife had a wife. Where is she? So she knew in her subconscious mind that that Macduff's wife has been killed and son has been killed. So Macbeth now has become a tyrant, an out and out tyrant. And Macbeth at this point is so weak that he goes over to the Hecate scene, the famous the witches, and ruled by the Hecate, the goddess of the witches, and which comprises the famous Hecate scene. He goes over to the witches, and here the witches, the Hecate, the goddess of the witches, gives him two prophecies. One is, be bold, bloody, and resolute, love to scorn the power of man, for none of woman born can harm Macbeth. Nobody born of a woman can kill Macbeth. And the second prophecy is, be lion-mettled, proud, and take no care. Macbeth shall never vanquished be, till Birnam wood to high Dunsinane hill shall come against him. Macbeth will never vanquished be, till high Birnam wood to Dunsinane hill shall come against him. So till the woods move up to Dunsinane hill, Macbeth will not be vanquished. So it seems Macbeth is invanquishable. Okay? And so Macbeth now becomes the tyrant. In the meantime, Malcolm and Macduff meet, and they discuss their country, how the country is doing under the tyrant. And Macduff tells Malcolm is the son of Duncan, who had fled because suspicion had obviously fallen upon him. And Macduff says, I think our country sinks beneath the yoke. It weeps, it bleeds. Each day a new gash is added to the wounds. And so Malcolm and Macduff decide to build up an army against Macbeth. And in this process, there is ultimately the battle between Malcolm, Macduff, their army, and Macbeth. Okay, so it leads up to the battle. Now, what Malcolm's army does is that they cut a bough of tree of the Dunsinane, of the Birnam wood. One bough of every tree of the Birnam wood is cut, and each soldier places a bough in front of him to camouflage himself. And then when the army moves up the Dunsinane hill, the bough covers them, and it looks as if the forest, Birnam wood, is moving up to Dunsinane hill. When Macbeth sees this, half his confidence is lost, because Birnam wood is moving up to Dunsinane hill. This is how the fiends lie like truth. They lie to beguile us into believing what is totally false and what is totally fantastical, what is totally misleading. And finally, in the confrontation between Macbeth and Macduff, Macbeth is still bloody, bold, and resolute, for none born of a woman can harm him. But then Macduff says, beware, Macbeth, be careful, for he had been untimely ripped from his mother's womb. It was a Caesarean baby in modern terms. He was delivered, by unnaturally by from his mother's womb. Okay, so that breaks the confidence of Macbeth totally. He says that I am like he says, they have tied me to a stake, I cannot fly, but bear like I must fly the course. So Macbeth fights till the end, and he says, I will not yield. But Macbeth has been so dependent on prophecies and so beguiled by falsities that Macbeth is killed at the end, because already the man in himself had been shaken and destroyed to the core because of his original sin of murdering Duncan and usurping the throne. He had usurped the throne. He was a tyrant. He degraded into a tyrant and an hired assassin. Macbeth is a tragic hero with the virtue, or with the hamartia of excessive ambition. And just like a tragic hero defined by Aristotle, according to the Greek philosopher Aristotle and his definition, he had been a man of high status who had fallen in height, because of some fault of his own, which is not a fault by itself, but excess of which is a fault. And so Macbeth proves to be a tragic hero by falling from a great height. Macbeth in some ways can be compared to Satan of Paradise Lost. Satan, who was once Lucifer, the angel of light, the favored, the most loved of God, had rebelled against God and had been thrown out of heaven and had been damned forever, and yet he refused to repent. Similarly, Macbeth steeped so far in blood that returning were as tedious as going over. Macbeth also refuses to repent. Macbeth refuses to yield, and Macbeth dies punished for his usurpation. If you have liked this video, please like, share, and